Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, Tics and Pandemic Practical Strategies During Home Quarantine. My name is Angela Sullivan, Medical Project Specialist, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. This webinar is being provided as part of the Tourette Health and Education Program, a program of the Tourette Association of America in partnership with the CDC. During the webinar, we would be very happy to hear from you and include your voice in the conversation. You may ask questions or share comments using the question panel on the right side of your GoToWebinar player at any time. We will collect your questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I do want to also mention that the slides for this presentation are under the handouts section of the control panel, and you can download the slides. I would also like to mention that funding for this webinar was made possible by our cooperative agreement with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views expressed by speakers and moderators do not necessarily reflect the official policies of the Department of Health and Human Services, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial practices, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. Before we get started, I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you some information about the Tourette Association of America. Next. So here at the TIA, we are dedicated to making life better for all people affected by Tourette syndrome and tic disorders through efforts that raise awareness, advance research and understanding, and provide support. Next slide. Awareness, research, and support are the three main pillars of our organization, and through these, we provide our community with many resources. Through social media, public relations, and news placement, as well as our youth ambassadors located across the country, we raise awareness of Tourette syndrome. This is also done through advocacy and lobbying on Capitol Hill for continued funding. By providing grants and fellowships to both young investigators and other professionals, we can advance research and support clinical trials on Tourette syndrome and new treatment options. Lastly, the TIA has a network of chapters and support groups across the country that provide support at the state level for their communities. In addition to this, programs of the TAA, such as online support groups, webinars like the one you'll hear today, the biennial conference, and in-person presentations, we provide support to our constituents. So with that said, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers this afternoon, Heather Simpson and Shannon Floyd. Heather Simpson is an occupational therapist at UF Health Fixel Institute for Neurological Diseases in Gainesville, Florida. Heather serves as the UF Health Tourette Center of Excellence Coordinator. Dr. Simpson has a pediatric specialty from the American Occupational Therapy Association and has been treating adults and children with tic and Tourette disorders for over 8 years. Dr. Simpson is an expert in occupational therapy management and Seebut for tic disorders. She has participated in multiple small research studies related to occupational and daily life functioning for those living with tic disorders. She is a member of the Behavioral Therapy Institute's TS for faculty as recognized by the Tourette Association. Shannon Floyd is a pediatric occupational therapist who operates a private outpatient business, Floyd Pediatric Therapy and Intervention for Tic Disorders, in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Shannon specializes in the treatment of children with tic disorders and Tourette syndrome. Prior to setting her focus on Seebut, Shannon's previous 17 years of experience specialized in the treatment of children with sensory integration difficulties and developmental delays. She has practiced in a variety of settings, including schools and outpatient clinics. In an effort to make occupational therapy services more accessible to students, Shannon developed programs in various settings, such as private schools. Since becoming Seebut certified in 2017, Shannon also developed Seebut programs at Children's Hospital in New Orleans, as well as at an outpatient sensory integration clinic, Pediatric Therapy North Shore in Mandeville, Louisiana. Shannon is currently working in conjunction with Little Fox Therapy in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, to set up a Seebut program at their outpatient therapy clinic. She is a member of a Tourette syndrome working group with Vanderbilt Children's Hospital in Nashville, and the working group serves as a platform for various medical professionals specialized in the treatment of this population to collaborate on ways to improve the quality of care of the Tourette syndrome population in Tennessee. Thank you both so much for the presentation today, and without further ado, please go ahead.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you everyone for being here and taking your time to join us today. I know you guys have a busy schedule, so thank you for being here. We're really hopeful, both Shannon and I are really hopeful that we can be of help to you today, whether it's one small thing or a lot of little things. So thank you for having us. There are no disclosures other than to say that we're both affiliated with Centers of Excellences, either distantly or personally, and that I am a consultant, as Angela mentioned, with the TAA. So without further ado, let's get to the good stuff. The reason why we're here today is we, as occupational therapists, sometimes we think a little bit differently, and we're all about function and practical tips. And so we want to talk about how in the world can you maintain sanity and health during this COVID-19 pandemic and really help your children in the way that they need without stressing you out. So we're going to briefly review Tic management strategies. We're going to emphasize the importance of normalcy during your day, explore strategies to make learning fun and practical, and really spend a good amount of time talking about emotional and arousal regulation for both you and your child. But first things first, we want to tell you thank you for all you're doing. You guys are kicking butt and taking names. This is a really tough time period for anyone. Let alone a parent, a caregiver, a spouse, whatever it might be, someone living with someone with Tourette syndrome and tic disorders. The fact that you're here and taking time to listen to this right now just shows that you're awesome and you are doing everything you can to make sure you and your family are living your best lives. And then also we want to say, we are going to share lots of information for you, but we also want to say no more work. Our goal is to incorporate things during your day that can make you feel like things are taking off burdens for you. So we're not trying to add to your plate because we know you're wearing many hats. So briefly, I know we've talked about occupational therapy before. I'm a big proponent of it, but we want to give you a mindset of where we're coming from. So part of our job as occupational therapists is to look at many different factors and occupations during someone's day. And what we consider occupations are everyday life activities. I like to tell people it's kind of like whatever occupies your time, that's what we want to work on. And right now during the pandemic, there's a lot of craziness occupying your time. So that's where we want to step in. Occupational therapists or occupational therapy assistants, we enable people to live their life to the fullest. So with or without tic, with or without OCD, with or without anxiety, we want to make sure people are living their best life. And this is in your family toolkit. So in case you aren't familiar with occupational or physical or speech therapy, we're ancillary services that can help with a whole bunch of the underside of that iceberg of Tourette's. And so if you're not plugged into an occupational therapist, this is kind of our plug to say, hey, we can help you out a little bit. Today, we're going to talk about some sensory integration and arousal anger management strategies, very basic. We're going to talk about how to promote independence and how to improve our ability to organize ourselves and be able to manage our executive functions. So that's our spiel for today. All right. The other thing I want to mention is the reason why we're doing this is we want to talk about the bloom where you are planted mindset. And if you haven't heard this phrase, I just love it. My dear friend Trisha Cardin, who's highly involved in the Tourette world, uses this all the time. But bloom where you're planted is understanding that right now what we're going through is really stinky and difficult, and it feels really ugly, and somehow we are expected and we want to be that beautiful flower in this time period of really difficult times. So the bloom where you're planted is an idea to understand where we are in life and what's going on, but we're going to try to make the most out of it with what we are given. So before we get on to the nitty gritty, my goal to you is just bloom where you're planted. Do what you can to be that flower, to be the good right now that is really challenging. So take a deep breath. We're going to spit a whole bunch of information out towards you, but we're here to answer your questions, and we have handouts for you with all these resources. So without further ado, we're going to get started, okay? So first things first, we're going to talk about tic management. And this comes from both Shannon and I being a little biased because we're both CBIT providers. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll mention that later. But what we do a lot of our day is helping people manage and learn strategies to manage those tics that are very difficult or interfering in their day. So during this COVID time, what you might notice, and a lot of my families are mentioning that their child's tics are becoming more frequent. They're becoming more intense. They might not notice new tics that they haven't seen before, such as coprolalia, hitting themselves, tics that might feel a little bit scary because they're new. And then also we might see tics interfering in daily activities, right? So because your child is at school most of the time, maybe now that they're at home and you're having to do a lot of homeschooling, maybe you notice that they're ticking more when they're on the computer or where they're doing their homework. And my first things first is to tell you that's okay. Don't worry. This is one of those waxing and waning times of the tics. But we're also going to talk about why is that. So we know that there are a lot of different things that influence tics. There's a lot of research out there. In the habit reversal world, we talk about what's known as things that happen before the tics. So antecedents. Antecedents are things that happen before the tics that make the tics worse. So there's lots of different factors. For example, when you talk about tics, we know tics can get worse, right? When someone's stressed, we know tics can get worse. But here during this COVID time, we've got a lot of antecedents that are pretty blaring and pretty strong. So, for example, a change in schedule. The fact that we're having to go from full-time school to being at home is definitely one of those triggers. Anxiety, which doesn't have to be said, fear and uncertainty, worry. Anytime we're in our own head and we're having lots of thoughts or fears can worsen tics. Fatigue, not getting great sleep at night. Any challenges, so when somebody is having to do difficult schoolwork or having to engage with their sibling that's a little bit more challenging. Boredom. Being bored actually allows you to pay more internal awareness to your tics, so it's not uncommon to tic more. Excitement, so maybe they're really excited to be at home and they get to play more video games. Chaos in the house. Anytime someone's sick, so if your child does have a little bit of a cough, whether it's COVID or not, it can increase tics. And then why we're talking about it, parental anxiety. When you're anxious, your child most likely is anxious, and that will carry through. So let's get to the good stuff. How do we manage some of those practical strategies, right? I understand that you're not going to be able to do all these, but I just want to throw out what we can, maybe here and there. So the first one is to establish a routine and maintain a schedule as much as possible. Routine and structure has been shown to decrease tic interference. So I know that there's nothing routine about what we're going through now, but if you can maintain structure such as continuing to go to activities after school, maintaining a structure for school instead of saying, let's do school from 8 to 12, or you just have to finish it by the end of the week, actually have a written schedule. The other thing is create as much normalcy as possible. So encourage virtual socialization, right? When things are uncomfortable, and right now we're having to isolate ourselves. So the more that your children can engage socially, even if it's virtually, would be a great way to manage tics. Engage in after-school activities, of course, in modified ways. So if they're missing their piano training or their voice lessons or their taekwondo, figure out ways that maybe they can do that virtually. Engage in Tourette support. So for those of you who do have a lot of support groups around you, engaging in virtual support groups or talking to those people who know what you're going through are really helpful. And because of the boredom, minimizing downtime. I don't know about you, but some of our schools here have a lot of downtime. They only have 1 or 2 activities a day that they may or may not be doing. And as mentioned earlier, boredom it's a big trigger for tics. And so figuring out structured ways that we can minimize downtime would be wonderful. The other thing is encourage creativity and imagination, especially during school routine. So Amanda Kaufman, who did the teaching webinar not long ago, she emphasized this, and I just want to double dip on this. We know that children with Tourette's do really well with things they like to do and they want to do. Oftentimes school is not something they like to do and they want to do. And so if they have to learn math, it might be something to say, hey, you have to learn math, but how do you want to do it? Do you want to do it with games? Do you want to do it laying on your belly? Do you want to do it while in a swing? This is a time where we can be flexible and allow your children to kind of learn the way that feels good for them. The less forced they are into that uncomfortable routine, the better it might be for their tics. So an example is somebody in a support group that I lead right now said his son really loves a certain part of history, and he has to do lots of writing assignments. And the only way he's been able to get his son really excited and engaged in activities is by writing about the stuff he likes. So he's only writing about the history stuff that he likes, or in math he's incorporating that. So allowing yourself to be flexible with school. We're going to emphasize the next part quite a bit over and over again, but participate together in activities such as exercise together. Exercise has been shown to decrease tics when you do it consistently and chronically. Engaging in self-care, which Shannon's going to talk to you a whole bunch about. And then having your me time, right? Allowing an hour or two a day for your child to go do whatever they want and allow themselves no questions asked. And Amanda Kaufman mentioned this as well, and she said, you know, if you want to go play video games for an hour, go play video games for an hour, but I get an hour too. So for you guys, having that me time is really important. Another thing is educating yourself on Tourette's, because right now things feel really weird. And one of the things we know is uncertainty, fear of talking to others, fear of stepping out into a post-COVID world might be difficult and kind of scary. And so allowing and encouraging your child to learn more about Tourette's. Why is it that I'm ticcing more right now? Or why is it that I'm having these scary tics? Can actually decrease the tics and decrease the interference of it. And then learn tic management strategies, which I'll talk on in a second. So some example activities, and these are all linked on here. When I talked about learning about Tourette's, some of my favorite ones are inspirational books. The Tim Howard, The Keeper book, Front of the Class movie and book are both really great. Amanda Kaufman mentioned Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. There's several big stars that talk about how Tourette's has made them the person they are, and it's really inspiring. And I'm happy to share those resources for you. But if they have to read a book, why not a book about, you know, a teacher who lived with Tourette's his whole life and has come better for it. As I mentioned, virtual programming. So if your kids like to hang out with their friends, and schedule 1 or 2 hours for them to have a Zoom meeting or them to have a virtual play things. There are lots of really fun games online, so you could do scavenger hunts, Pictionary. You don't have to be face-to-face to do that. And engaging socially is a great way to decrease burdens, both for your child, but for you. How to make a fidget toy. So there's lots of fun videos on how to be creative and crafty during this time. We know that's a strength of kids with Tourette's, so why not use it to your advantage? Come up with a mindfulness toy, a fidget toy, a calming lava lamp, painting. The other thing that's coming out is the Tourette Youth Program, which the Tourette Association will bring up more information for. But in the middle of May, there's going to be a lot of programming for children and teens, such as yoga and learning how to talk about Tourette's, possibly how to make a fidget toy. And those things are really empowering and have a secondary effect on tics. And lastly, on this page is a Tourette ID card. If you have not seen this, the Tourette Association has them free. But essentially, it's when you're getting back into the society after being locked down for a while. This card says, you know, I have a condition called Tourette syndrome. It makes me cough, sniff, or clear my throat, but I am not sick. And I like to empower a lot of my kids to have this when they go out, so that when they do cough because of the tic, they can just leave it on the table next to them. or they can give it to their friends and they can read it. Again, empowering your child increases their success with managing their tics. I won't go over this too much, but this is an example daily schedule that I found online that I'm a big fan of. And what I like about this is it's structure, but it's fun structure, right? So wake up whenever you want, outdoor time, whether this is family walk, exercise, but get their energy out first thing in the morning. An hour for academic time, right? We're just asking for a little bit of an hour. Then an hour after that, go to creative time. This creative time is really designed to help decrease that boredom, right? So after they finish school, what do? Be creative, do something, bring it to the group. You have lunch, your break, home chores, which is something we really like to emphasize. You know, kids don't like chores, but maybe this is help cook, or maybe this is help learn how to change a tire on your car for some of those older kids. There's a quiet time on this, and then free time. There's a lot of free time later on in the day, but again, you can see there's not that much academic time, but it still gets the job done. And because you can see that structure and your kids know what's next, it's decreased likelihood to decrease or have their tics increase. And then last thing, here's my shameless plug for Seebut. If you have not heard of Seebut, it's called the Comprehensive Behavioral Intervention for Tics. It is kind of the gold standard of behavioral therapy for tics. That one of the biggest problems with Seebut is that there's not enough providers, and it's sometimes hard to find providers. But the one positive from COVID at this time is that many Seebut providers are able to provide telehealth Seebut. And so you could live 5 hours away from a Seebut provider and not have to go there, but can do it right from your own home. So if you're looking for something to be productive and manage the tics, hopefully get covered by insurance and not have to drive very far, this might be an ideal time to learn how to manage those tics. So if you have questions about Seebut or how to find a provider or how long the program is, that I have the link to the book up here for you, and we're obviously able to answer any questions. Along with that is Tic Helper, and Tic Helper is an evidence-based, computer-based Seebut program. And so what it does is you pay a flat fee, and it takes you through the whole Seebut program. And so if your child has only self-learning that they have to do, it teaches you all about having tics, what makes your tics worse, how to manage them, and oftentimes can be a nice fill-in for kids whose tics are bothering them. So I'm going to pass it on to Shannon for the next part of our talk, but we're open to any questions towards the end of the webinar. So yes. Shannon, it's all yours.
Thank you, Heather. That was great information. Yeah, so we wanted to spend a little time talking about arousal management, also known as self-regulation. This is really important during this time because, like Heather said, there's a lot of uncertainty in the air, and we're all of our sensory systems are all stuck in one specific place in our homes right now. And so I'm going to teach you some ways not only to identify your own arousal level, but to help your child so that you guys can work more comprehensively and cohesively within the same environment. You can change it. And so it's important to talk about sensory integration when we talk about self-regulation. And if you haven't heard that term before, it's just the body's ability to take in information from the environment, process it efficiently to give you good outputs, okay? When I talk about sensory integration with families, I love to relate it to the Winnie the Pooh characters because you have different tiers in sensory integration. And so kind of the lowest tier is kind of more like Eeyore. Eeyore kind of just walks around very lackadaisically, doesn't have a lot going on. He conforms to any surface he's put on. So, that's more of your low arousal kids that kind of need a lot of encouragement to get up and moving. And then you have, the Tiggers. We all know a Tigger in our life. Tigger bounces all over the place. There is no structure, no routine to what he is doing. He is bouncing from thing to thing, just trying to seek as much information from the environment that he can because his sensory system isn't doing that for him. And then, the ones that our tic disorder and Tourette syndrome kiddos can probably relate to the most is Piglet. Piglet's a little more worrisome. He's very cautious about what he does. those are kind of those higher level kids. You know, he's definitely more bothered by things than everybody else. And I always like to point out Winnie the Pooh because he's kind of the just right character. We can say he's a little obsessive about his honey pot, but other than that, he kind of gets the job done and isn't quite bothered by many things going around him. So just to understand sensory a little bit more, that's a fun way to kind of picture it. What we do know about sensory integration in our population with Tourette syndrome is that our Tourette syndrome kids often have disturbing and interfering sensations, not only from the environment, but internally. And Heather and I will work with our kiddos to really get them aware of their bodies and identify those premonitory urges or those feelings or sensations or thoughts that they're having just before their tic happens. So even though we're bringing awareness to it, it might be more significant at that time, these kids are experiencing this all throughout their day. So you can just imagine how that would feel in your own body. We also know that kids with Tourette syndrome reported a higher sensitivity to sensory input, such as clothing, lights, and sounds. Those aren't the only ones, of course, but those are some that have shown to be most prevalent in this population. You can understand that this is definitely a constant source of irritation, discomfort, and distraction. You know, you wonder why they're not paying attention to what you're saying. Well, internally, they're feeling, you know, this yucky feeling in their stomach that's telling them their tic is about to happen, and then they're bothered by their clothes. And so you can imagine it's really hard to pay attention to maybe verbal information coming in if I have all these other sensory signals going on. Research has shown that 70% of people with Tourette syndrome have reported difficulty with emotional outbursts and controlling their anger. And there's a smaller percentage that have reported, you know, episodes of rage or rage attacks. And we're going to talk about some strategies to kind of identify these triggers before they happen. And then, so what might you see, you know, when your child's on the verge of a sensory meltdown? How do we know they're getting to that point where they are just done? Because like I talked about before with sensory integration, you know, I talked about the different characters that you might see in Winnie the Pooh. But the reality with our high arousal kids, which typically tends to be more of our Tourette syndrome kids, what's happening is all that information is getting to their brainstem and it is stuck there. It is not filtering out efficiently how it needs to go. And so you're going to start seeing them kind of get overloaded, and you might see them kind of get a little quiet. They might retreat away from the situation they're in, biting their nails. Their speech might get a little more rapid or just agitated. You can tell there's not a lot of inflection in their voice. Yeah, shallow breathing or signs of tension. You know, some kids will really tense their whole bodies up, or they'll stop breathing. A lot of kids hold their breath, they'll tell me. You might see them a little more hyperactive or impulsive, more obsessive and anxious, definitely. And definitely you'll see more tics kind of start come out, because tics are related to emotion. And so when we're feeling all these different sensations in our body, our tics kind of get reinforced that way. And so a program Heather and I really love, and we use, I mean, 9 times out of 10 and have found it really successful with our kiddos, is a program called Leaky Breaks. And this is really important for you guys to know because A, it's free, which is awesome, and you have access to it. Heather provided the link there below, but if you go on there, they have amazing videos and handouts and such that can help you through this time, practical strategies for self-regulation stuff and for tic management. And there's even an obsessive compulsive toolbox that they give. And so I just want you guys to know that's out there. But we talk about the beaker when we talk about Leaky Breaks. And all the beaker is explaining to kids that all the different sensations and things that you feel throughout the day slowly start to fill up that beaker, starts filling up with water. And I love to tell them it's like that volcano experiment with baking soda and water, which is kind of what our visual is showing us down here. And so you mix the baking soda and vinegar and eventually it explodes. So if kids are trying to hold their tics in, which mostly happens when they're school age and they're in school because they don't want people to see them or whatever. Parents will say, well, they come home and their tics are coming out like crazy. Well, when you hold in your tics, it actually reinforces your tics. And that's why when they come home and they're safe, all those tics they kind of held in come out more intense. But the beaker is just showing us that, you know, we definitely have sensations and experiences throughout the day that start to fill up that frustration beaker a little bit. And so what can we do? What can we do? And how can we identify when our beakers are getting a little bit full? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next slide here. We have to understand that our Tourette syndrome kids, they all, not, I won't say all, most of them have coexisting conditions, ADHD, OCD, anxiety, those types of things. So imagine waking up like that. You're already waking up feeling anxious, like I missed something or I'm late for something, or, I've already got that going on. And then my OCD makes me go back and turn the light switch off 10 times before I walk out of my room because I'm not quite sure if I turned it off. So before they even leave their bedrooms in the morning, you can imagine how these coexisting conditions are already starting to fill that beaker up a little bit. And so steps to managing their beaker. Identify what fills your child's beaker. A lot of times I'll just take a beaker and I'll do it. I know for myself, I have 2 kids. I'm in the trenches with y'all trying to manage homeschool and working all from home. And at times my husband's working from home. And so we're all kind of challenged and meeting each other's needs. And so, I talked to my girls the other day about, I need you to help me a little bit and take a little bit off of my beaker so that I can have more to give you. Because when I'm doing everything for the family, which is what we're all doing as parents right now, I'm managing their school schedule, my work schedule, let alone cleaning the house and cooking dinner, right? All those things are starting to fill my beaker up. And so they come at me with a problem and my beaker's already kind of full. And so they're not going to get the best reaction from me. So identify what is that for you. And when kids hear about your beaker and what triggers you, a lot of times it opens up conversation with them. Well, what in your life, what's stressing you out? Is the way, I always tell parents, don't be offended if it's the way that we're approaching something. It's a way to kind of learn together. Take detours as needed. This is so important. If our kiddos are sitting there and they're working on homeschool stuff and they're getting really frustrated and you start seeing the pencil slam down on the paper and you're getting some of those early warning signs, you know what? Go take a minute. And I'm going to show you some really practical strategies to kind of help calm that central nervous system and bring them back to the activity. But take those detours before you explode, prior to after you explode. And we just talked about managing your beaker so that you're more available to help your child manage theirs. And it's important to understand that we talked about a small population that will tell us about rage attacks, okay? And just so you know, when that is happening, it's really difficult to handle as a parent because we just want to fix everything. The biggest thing you can do is no talk and no touch, because that's adding more sensory input into their already overwhelmed sensory system. So just restraining or removing them from the environment as much as possible, and limit the talking and touching. That is not the time to rationalize through what happened. Afterwards, then let's talk about it and what can we do next time.
Thank you, Shannon. I just wanted to add real quickly, I think that your part where you said taking detours beforehand, that's where I like those schedules that allow free time and creative time and rest breaks, because those can be beaker breaks or detours without actually having to do that. And so an example of that one, or the one that Amanda Coffin shared, is helpful, and that's why they help.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so what can we do? What can we do to regulate our central nervous system and to keep that beaker level low? The first thing, it seems so simple, but is probably one of the most important things you can do, is encourage movement. And Heather made a really great point. Some kids really like the structure and it built into their schedule. So if a visual schedule like what she showed you is going to encourage that movement, then do that, because in order to movement kind of helps calm everything and kind of get everything organized. It's kind of the orchestrator of everything, okay? So if we're feeling overwhelmed or whatever, it kind of taps into the orchestrator part of our body, and it'll help filter some of those feelings and emotions that we're starting to feel. And so I really love the little indoor and outdoor obstacle courses right now. As it's getting nicer outside, we can't necessarily go to playgrounds, but we definitely can just use whatever tools we have in our backyard. My girls took hula hoops and a basketball, and they created something the other day. And if you time, kids love to be timed. So if you time something, it's going to encourage them to participate rather than, oh, just go out and do that. Let's see, if you can do it in 1 minute, and they typically really will like to do that. Doing like a bingo board, you put with your child different movement things that you can do throughout the day. And let's see, today I need you to cross 3 of those off. I love to encourage movement before seated academic time, because it really gets their brain and body ready to sit and focus on what's going to be presented to them. So you can do something simple as chair push-ups. The kid just puts their hand on each side of their chair and pushes up 5 to 10 times, and you're getting some movement. That's more of our proprioceptive piece, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But even just moving your head in circles and side to side and those types of things. For the older kids, I love, right now is a great time to try out new activities. There's so many gyms and organizations doing free classes because of the COVID crisis. And so going on there, and if yoga is something you've never tried and you get embarrassed to do it in a group setting, you can do it right from your home, and a lot of times it's free. I know there's taekwondo classes and those types of things. So the Couch to 5K program is really good. It kind of gets you going, but it does it in smaller increments throughout your day. And think about, how can I encourage this movement throughout my day? Heather was talking about, well, if I have always done math this way, can I do it another day? Can you not solve problems while you're doing jumping jacks? 5 times 3 equals, whatever. And then you can kind of go through that, or passing a ball back and forth. So you're encouraging that movement, but they can also do it while they're doing their academic activities too. And then just yoga cards, good kids love visuals sometimes. For the older kids, they might like the classes, which I enjoy yoga. Me and my 9-year-old, we actually do it before our day, and it helps kind of get us focused and ready for the day. But there's also these yoga cards, and you can make fun little obstacle courses with that and trying to find each card. How long can you hold it? But that also helps regulate your breathing. I want you to understand, with physical exercise and movement, we want you to do it for a sustained amount of time. If you just go out and do 5 jumping jacks, that's not going to calm your beaker. It's not going to take much out of your beaker. You need rhythmical, predictable input to really tell that central nervous system, it's okay, I don't need to freak out. And when you're kind of giving your body what it needs, your brain kind of calms down a little bit too and doesn't have to compensate for that. Oh, swimming. I underlined swimming. I do want to point that out. Summertime is coming up. I don't know how much access we'll have to public pools. I'm not sure what that is all going to look like, but swimming is probably one of my favorite activities I really encourage families to do with their kids to help with regulation, because you're getting so much input from the water. It's like a whole body experience. Good bilateral coordination, and then you're focusing on your breathing, because as you're working through the water, you're having to breathe, and that's really, really regulating for a lot of kids. Swim teams are really great in the summertime to it keeps that that routine, and they go and practice several times a week, and it's really good for them. Okay, we talked a lot about breathing as we were moving, but breathing on its own is just a really great strategy to also lessen some of that fluid in your beaker. And so deep breathing really decreases your heart rate, relaxes your muscles, and calms your body. I know I use this a lot if I'm in traffic and then I'm getting really frustrated, and I'll start doing a 4-box breathing thing. So some really great strategies for that. There's some visuals here. There's a 4-box breathing technique. We really like this with a lot of our Tourette syndrome kids as well. They find it pretty helpful, but just breathing in through your nose slowly for a count of 4, holding that breath. It's really important to do these slow. And so I encourage kids to wear a watch with a second hand so that you can really see what 4 counts feel like, because some kids will rush through that. And if you're rushing through, you're actually activating your system again. And we don't want that. We want to calm. And so in order to calm, we have to go slow and really focus on controlled breathing. And so I love this little star 1, 2, breathing in, holding, breathing out. Again, I would do that for a certain count. So breathe in for 3, hold, breathe out for 3. And I saw something the other day I really loved with your hand. And so it was like breathe in, breathe out, and then you go to the next finger, breathe in, breathe out. That's really good when kids need practical things to kind of keep their body busy while they're focused on their breathing. Practical things like making pinwheels or blowing things across the floor, cotton balls with straws, or in the bathtub, those types of things. You can take straws and blow things across the bathtub. For our older kids, there's lots of really great breathing apps, and Heather and I have put some in our slideshow, so if you guys want to refer to them later. But there's some really great engaging kind of apps, and you can kind of see how you're breathing and if you're breathing slow enough and those types of things. But don't underestimate breathing. I know we do it all day long, but how you breathe really can help calm your body. And then another really great organizer is deep pressure and heavy work activities. This is calming to the central nervous system. And a lot of times our patients are already seeking out this kind of input. Heather and I talk about this all the time. Sometimes we'll give a child an exercise and it's just not enough. They need more. They need more sensation into their muscles. And so how can we provide that for them? And okay, some ways you can do that at home. Heather already kind of told you hand fidgets, those are really great, especially for our kids with, anxious tendencies. I really like, putting things in the pockets. And so if they're working on something, they can put their hand in their pocket and fidget with it. I know I've been using this strategy a lot during this pandemic, just organizing myself, but taking a warm shower. I always tell Heather, I do my best thinking in the shower. And why is that? Well, because I'm calm and my body's relaxed and my brain can kind of focus on what I need to focus on. You could do that with just washing your face with a warm washcloth, wrap yourself in a blanket or towel. You can kind of see a lot of those. I love the more practical things like hammering nails, like working on a project. If you have somebody who's crafty in your house and likes to work with wood and those types of things, what can you create? And we're going to talk about executive functioning in a minute, but what a great way to pull both of those in at the same time. I just had a colleague of mine say one of her teens really loved to cut wood. When he got frustrated and felt his beaker about to overflow, he just had a wood pile in the back, and he would chop that wood, and that really got him to a place where he was nice and calm. I love helping with chores and making it fun. And so like pulling wet clothes out of the washer and dryer, kids love to throw baskets and those types of things. And so like with the basketball, they all have those little things on the back of their door or whatever. And so making, that stuff fun, but pulling that wet clothes out of there and maybe tossing it into the dryer and those types of things, and carrying the loaded baskets of folded clothes. Heavy work just really has to do with any time those muscles and joints can kind of be pushed together. Some kids really crave that or really want to be wrapped up in things. A really great strategy for the older kids who love that deep pressure, I always say if you go and get like an Under Armour type shirt, it does not have to be that brand, but just so you can visualize the breathable type, that's at least a size smaller than what you typically wear. It can really compress your body and make you feel a little more in control and a little more comfortable. Weighted blankets at bedtime are really, really good. Another great strategy. Kids love body pillows and things on each side of them as well. So it's another way to kind of get that deep pressure and help calming. But I love animal walks. And again, animal walks are a great strategy to be able to incorporate with your academic stuff. We'll crab walk over to the answer for this one, and you're just putting note cards on the floor with the answers, those types of things. Carrying in groceries. I know kids can't necessarily go to the grocery store, but they can help you carry them in. And all of that is just really great heavy work activities for you to do. And then some other ways just to kind of help during this pandemic and to keep us all organized is grounding ourselves. We are overwhelmed with emotions right now. And Heather and I both talked about how tics are directly interrelated with emotions. So even if we're excited, we're going to tic more. If we're anxious or nervous, we're going to tic more. So grounding ourselves, if we see those early warning signs. And so I have a visual on the right, but I love this one. A lot of times I'll tell kids, okay, well, where do you want to go today? And the beach is usually a really big one. I'm a big fan of the beach. Heather gets to live by the beach, so I'm a little jealous. But so, ask the kids, what's 5 things you can see just visually in your mind? What's 4 things you could touch at the beach? What's 3 things you could hear? What's 2 things you could smell? And 1 thing you would taste while you're at the beach? You can even do it. I did it with my girls the other day just in our backyard. They were kind of getting at each other and we all needed a minute. Girls, what's 5 things you can see? And they did a little game with it and they thought it was fun. Some other things like say the alphabet slowly and walking backwards, those all override your cognitive system. So our cognitive brain wants to tell us, freak out, freak out, freak out. But if we can do something, just a small little something to be able to override that cognitive thought process, it can really take us down a notch and help us stay a little more calm. So say the alphabet slowly. You have to think about that when you do that. It doesn't come as routinely as saying it forward. And just walking backwards. People don't realize that. I actually showed that to a little school that I was at in Mandeville, Louisiana, and they love that. Anytime kids come down to the office and they're really upset, they have to walk backwards to the office before they even sit down. And they said 9 times out of 10, it really helps get them ready for just learning how to calm their sensory system. We talked about fidgets and things, but carrying a small object in your pocket, they have worry stones and things like that. I'll find myself, I have a button that fell off of a jacket, and I didn't realize this, but every time I have that jacket on, my hand is in my pocket and I'm flipping that button back and forth, especially if I'm in situations that I'm unsure of. So, just giving yourself the ability and your child the ability to kind of have something in their pockets to ground them. A shell, a stone, like I said, a button is really great, or a certain fabric that's calming to them. Couple more I just want to mention. I really love where everybody will tense all of our muscles in our body, and then we'll release and we'll tense. That's another great deep pressure strategy, but also kind of helps ground you and bring you back. And then progressive muscle relaxation strategies. That Leaky Breaks program I talked about, they have a really great script on there that y'all can do. But Heather also had posted some others that you can access. But honestly, Pinterest and all them, if you put in progressive muscle relaxation and you look that up, you're going to find several different scripts. With one kiddo I worked with, she really liked it when I recorded myself doing it with her. And then she had it on her phone that she could access at any time. So if your child has a person in their life that seems to be more regulating to them and comforting, that might be a really great strategy too. And then the last one with self-regulation is distracting ourselves, not focusing on the news so much, or the number of cases that are in our area, because our phones want to keep reminding us of that, unfortunately. And so a lot of our kids are very expressive and they love to express themselves. So singing, dancing, writing a story about what's going on, or a comic strip to share with people, crosswords and those types of things, baking and cooking. Not only are they great executive functioning skills, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but they're very regulatory type skills. Doing something good for somebody else. I know that's harder right now because we can't interact with people, but I find little things like stones that people have painted and they put at different places, and you approach those and you think, oh, that's so nice. Somebody took the time to do that. So you can definitely do those things and feel like you're helping without actually still maintaining those social distancing guidelines. Okay, so anger strategies. So here's what we were talking about with our beaker system. How can we kind of catch those triggers before we're exploding? So identify strategies that's already worked to calm your child. I have one, she struggles with a little bit of that, maintaining the self-regulation piece. And so every time she calms herself down, we write it down. Okay, well, this seemed to work for you. And so she has a little working list she can go to when she's really having a hard time doing it herself. Identify those triggers. That beaker program is such a great way to do that. Just show them the beaker, what is it that's triggering you, but also tracking that. So, hey, I noticed when you were doing math the other day, you really started getting frustrated and you were banging that pencil on the desk. What is it with math? And sometimes it might be the teacher. It might just be the way that the teacher is teaching doesn't, again, don't take offense to that. Kids all learn differently. It might be the information that's being presented, and we've got some other sensory things that are kind of weighing on us, and our processing speed might not be very good, and so that's kind of a harder subject. So that's where I would incorporate movement before I sit down. And then when they're sitting down, making sure they have a water bottle next to them, that they can take water breaks as needed, which is good oral input and deep pressure input. Crunchy snacks on hand, like pretzels and bagels and things like that really take a lot of crunch or pull, because you're getting that deep pressure through the mouth. Chewing on gum or candy that you can put on in your mouth to suck on. But I really like this anger thermometer. And so they talked about, well, what do I look like? So when I'm starting to get a little frustrated, I might sigh loudly or growl or things like that. And then what did I do to kind of calm myself down? And so for them, it was get a drink of water, squeeze Play-Doh. They really liked that. And you can see as their beaker gets more full, they get up here to that yelling and starting to throw things. Well, when you're throwing things, you're getting lots of deep pressure input and proprioceptive input by doing that. Well, let's give that before it gets to that point. But taking a detour, shredding paper is a simple one, and it's that monotony of just shredding the paper, but it's giving your hands something to do and some really great input. So just kind of tracking things to give you and your child a way to kind of manage that, and just identifying certain times of the day. You know, academics don't have to be the first thing when you get up now, right? We can take a minute to wake up and go get our, you know, exercise in before we sit down and do our academics. Or if we're better after lunch, you know, let's maintain that schedule and push that schedule around those better times of our day. And just some really great resources I love to share with you guys. Like I said, the Leaky Breaks program, it is free. Awesome resources on there, great videos for you and your child to watch. And a lot of the strategies I showed you today with some of the coping and anger mechanism type things. There's a coping skills for kids workbook and a coping skills for teens. Just really great practical strategies if you find yourself getting stuck and needing something else. They've got some really great stuff. I use this book a lot, and even though it says answers to questions teachers ask about sensory integration, I feel like it could be answers to questions parents ask as well. And it really outlines what sensory systems your child might be struggling with, so you can kind of identify that more. There's little checklists in there, and they have really great little handouts as far as deep pressure, kind of heavy work stuff that not only would work in the classroom, but would work in your own home as well. And then understanding your child's sensory signals. This is an awesome resource for parents. You can open it up and just anything your child might be struggling with. Let's say, you know, my child chews on everything. They're constantly chewing on the collar of the shirt or biting their nails or whatever. You can go to that in the book and it'll say, why does my child chew on everything? It'll tell you why, the sensory explanation. And underneath it'll give really practical strategies for you to try to help them not chew on everything. So I just think that's a great resource for you guys to know. And then we love, all of us OTs who have done sensory work have all really recommended the Out of Sync Child book, but it has a sequel to it, The Out of Sync Child Has Fun, and it has really great movement activities and things like that. Again, just ways for you to get more information if you're feeling stuck and like you need more. And then Understood.org. I love, Heather and I talked about how much we really love this website. Not only can you personalize it for your child, but it also goes by grade levels. And so, you know, you can put anything in there. My child's having trouble with such and such, or they have lots of really great resources and handouts that you can do, and just great strategies for at-home use, things that you can do at home to help with these different skills while you know, maybe you can't go meet with your OT at this time. So just another great resource for you guys to know about. Okay, so how do we foster independence through all of this? You know, we talk fostering independence, it has a lot to do with our executive functioning skills. And so what are those? You know, it's our ability to organize, manage our time, remember things, initiate and complete a task, you know, see it all the way through. If we come up with a problem, how are we addressing that? Are we just giving up and getting frustrated, which is going to fill our beaker? Or have we come up with strategies to kind of problem solve through that? So if you see any of these things on here and you're like, yes, my child, that's my child, that just means they're probably struggling with some higher level skills, such as executive functioning skills. And so what is that? I like to say, you know, it's kind of the air traffic control center of the brain, or that's how it's been described. It helps us manage our information, make decisions, and plan ahead. We use these skills every single day. And I just told you, you know, with my kids at home, I'm doing this from the minute I wake up. I'm getting their checklist done for what they need to do for school. I've got my planner on board, but that's what helps keep our ship floating and get all of our stuff done that we need to get done. And it's a way for me to kind of see, you know, checklists and stuff I love because they can check it off and show me they've done it. But just know we do this every day, all day, but it's not necessarily a skill we were born with. Some of us need a little extra help kind of learning how to do this. And so just some practical strategies. How can you help at home? The first thing is praise them for what you've asked them to do. A lot of times our kids who struggle with the executive functioning are always being told better ways they can do something, or you should have done it this way, or why did you do it that way? You know, we need to build that confidence so that they're going to take more risks and kind of working things out on their own. So praise them for what you ask them to already do if they've done it right. Don't always tell them exactly what to do and how to do it. Don't cue too much. Okay, you have this science project for your class. So what are you going to need to do to get done? And let them problem solve through. What materials do I need? Where am I going to go to work on this? You know, if something doesn't work out, I was telling Heather the other day, we were kind of changed the spot and where my kids are kind of doing their homeschool. It kind of rotates weekly as far as our needs go. And so, you know, I told my daughter, okay, this is what you need to get done. She left all of her pencils and everything in the other room. So she had to make 20 trips back and forth. And I just said to her, that's taken a long time to kind of go back and get everything that you need. Do you think there's another way that we could kind of have all of our supplies? And then she put everything in a pencil box. So she problem solved through it, but I just kind of gave a little cue to encourage that. Heather talked about this before, create structure and routines to promote task completion, visual schedules, graphic organizers. My girls love checklists. That works in our house. We don't plan it out by the hour, but it's a checklist kind of thing. And they know they've got to get movement. That's all built into there. And so they can take that as they need. But there's some really great online resources, especially for the older kids. There's lots of really great apps and things that will remind you of things if you put it in. And visual timers. I love the use of visual timers. So, you know, that will help with transitions and stuff as well. If your child is having difficulty kind of going from one thing to the next or stopping the fun thing they're doing to kind of get back to some academic type stuff. Don't underestimate the power of communication. Make sure your whole family is on the same page as to what's expected. If I have a checklist for my girls and my husband doesn't realize I have that checklist and I find them upstairs on video games and only one thing's been checked off, well, then that's not great for me or for them. And so if my husband understands as well, and my kids understand this needs to be done before you have your free time, then it's probably going to get done better. And you're not going to have to remind as much throughout the day. Consistency in everything. With executive functioning, you know, we have trouble organizing sometimes. And so keeping everything in one designated spot. I just have a bin. I have a bin that all of their school stuff goes in. So it doesn't have to be crazy organized, but if you're missing something, that's probably where you need to go to look for it. And I use a OneTouch system with a lot of my kids, and even my own kids. But if you have that piece of paper in your hand and you've touched it once, you don't put it down just somewhere to get back to it later. Go put it where it needs to go. You touched it once, go deal with it. So that way, then you don't have to remember it later, because a lot of times working memory is hard for executive functioning. Realize this is a work in progress. Not only are you trying to work this out, your child is trying to figure this out. They're missing their friends. They're used to the routine that the teacher did. You know, the teacher's going to teach differently than we try to help them at home. And so, you know, give yourself breaks and know that, you know, hey, if we didn't get to it today, that's okay. We have tomorrow and we're all going to be okay. Breaking down tasks into smaller sections. This is so good. We use this a lot in occupational therapy, but we'll break the task down, but we'll do some chaining type stuff. So shoe tying, I'll just use that for an example, because that's one we use a lot of chaining with. And so if a child's having trouble initially kind of getting that initial coordination to kind of loop the shoelace through and everything, maybe I start that part and get them set up to kind of finish the task. But if the child can finish it, but then they're just having trouble understanding the end part where you wrap it around and put it through the bunny hole, then maybe they do up to that part and then I help them finish that. And slowly but surely you can kind of take your cues away and let them kind of finish and do what they need to do. Okay, and just to kind of reiterate, I talked about the OneTouch system, really great. As soon as you touch it, put it where it needs to go. Stop, think, plan, and do. I just feel like it's such a great visual if we're having trouble just initiating a task or problem solving through a task. Have all supplies, we talked about that in one place, and rewards and incentives, great apps for this. We provided a few here. Some kids really like, you know, practical visuals. Kids, older kids, teenagers, they like to drive and earn money for, you know, gas and stuff. And so, you know, you guys can figure out, some people do, our last name is Floyd, so we might do Floyd bucks in our house, but, you know, just learning different ways that will motivate your child. Checklists and planners, great apps for that as well. And then there are some timer apps if you don't have those at your house already.
And I think all those are linked on the PDF in case you need them.
Yes, I think so too. Okay, and this just last little slide to remind you, you know, we're not adding more work to your to your caseload here. Executive functioning works so great when you can incorporate it into your activities of daily living. So even planning out a meal, you have to figure out what groceries you need and how much of each ingredient you need and how much time you need to bake something and those types of things. And you're really focused when you're doing that. So again, it's going to be nice and regulating. Put your child in charge of their own laundry. My 9 and 11-year-old, they are in charge of their own laundry. And I love the heavy work they do when they're pulling their bins down from upstairs to put the clothes into the washer, organizing the pantry, carrying in groceries, or if I loved when Heather said pick an activity of their interest. Kids love YouTube videos and those tutorials. So pick a fun activity they like. Okay, how would you teach this to somebody else? What steps would they need to do the same thing that you're doing, if it's an experiment or a craft project or whatever. We talked about identifying potential stressors and triggers prior to encountering them versus after encountering them. And have your child talk to other adults about ways they manage their stress. My daughter all the time will ask my husband, well, what do you do at work when you blah, blah, blah? And I love that they have that dialogue, but kids really listen. And they watch and see how we react. Doesn't mean we're great all the time. Trust me, I don't keep it cool all the time, but I try to get more aware of my internal triggers so that I know, hey, I need a break for a second. Y'all are going to need to manage yourself for a second. Have the child focus on goals that are personally motivating. Like Heather said, a lot of our kids don't love academics to start with. And so if we make that the biggest focus, that's really hard. They're just not motivated to do it. So, hey, let's do a little bit of this. And then remember that game you were wanting to play or whatever, kind of motivate them that way. And then focus on positive memories for long-term success. Again, a lot of times will say, you're not doing this right, or I need to do this more, but praise them for what they're doing right. It's building self-confidence, and it's actually establishing a good relationship as well.
Yeah, a few things I wanted to mention. Pixar, I believe it's Pixar, just came out with a whole cooking channel for children. I thought it was really cool. I just saw it last weekend, so it might be something that you could look up, and they'll probably do fun things. But also, one of the things that we talk about with independent life skills, this is really important for teenagers, right? Especially teenagers who want to go to college or want to drive. They can't do those things, or they shouldn't possibly be doing those things until they know how to do their own laundry, until they know how to cook, until they know how to take care of their own medicine. And there's no greater learning or executive functioning training than actually doing it at your own home when things aren't as, school heavy as they used to be. So that's why we wanted to bring up this life skills part, is it's a really important part that we can naturally bring in during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, just some great resources for you guys to have. I always love to empower you. We're all kind of stuck inside right now. I don't know about you guys, but we play a lot of board games in our house right now. And so I love this little 10-game list of executive functioning skills on the left. You may already have some of these. Chess, Uno is another one we play a lot. It's not mentioned on here, but just some really great resources. Pathway to Success is where I found that little list. And then we mentioned Understandorg earlier. The parentingpod.com had some really great executive functioning activities. Again, if you get stuck and you're like, I just need a little something or an idea, great way to go. And then I loved this Developing Child from harvard.edu had great resources, and they all went by age. And so if you ever needed just some extra support in that was a really great place for you to look.
I saw this, I have Jenga right now that like all my kids can pull out. If it's one color, they have an exercise written on top. And so they can still play Jenga, but then they have an exercise that they pull out. No, it's kind of like Jenga roulette. And I saw really cool the other day, someone was playing basketball in the basketball court. They were playing horse, the game where you shoot and the other player has to match it. But whoever missed that shot, they had to do an exercise, and it was really cool. They were out there playing basketball, but they had to remember the activities, and they were challenging themselves. So there's a lot of really fun ways to do that now. I love
that. That's awesome.
Real quickly, I know we could talk to you forever about this, but taking care of yourself, right? What you might notice in yourself is stress, anxiety, maybe a little bit quick to anger, as Shannon had mentioned, a quick fuse, feeling a little bit out of control. The support groups I run, I can't tell you how many parents tell me, I just feel like a bad parent. I feel like I'm not doing anything well right now. And that's really tough to deal with, taking that burden on. Difficulties keeping up with work, right? Having to have your child stay with someone else for a few days, or not being able to get work done because your kids need some help, or maybe you're just not getting sleep. So first things first, again, you are not alone. This is a tough time for all of us, but it's a really tough time when you have a loved one with Tourette's. And so you've got the Tourette Association, you've got us, you've got support groups that can help you through this. But I won't go through all this, but just remember to take care of yourself. First things I tell my parents is just lower expectations. You guys are wonderful, fabulous. You're taking the time to be here, but put your expectations down just a little bit. You don't have to be perfect right now. What is perfect is being imperfect, and you being able to make mistakes and be stressed is good. This is not a time for straight A's. This is not a time to, be able to do 3 after school sports. Just be gentle to yourself. Be kind and gentle. Schedule time for yourself. So I think I did one PowerPoint, I don't remember when, but it said that I think parents have like 17 minutes of alone time a day. That's prior to COVID and not having a kid with tics. And so 17 minutes is just not enough, and figuring out how you can schedule time for yourself. If you feel like you're anxious, schedule yourself some time to learn, just like your child is going to learn about Tourette's. Maybe they can learn about anxiety or pandemics and why is it so scary. But also being mindful that limiting your news intake is really important. Reach out for support, whether it's national, local, friends. You have wine hour. I don't care what it is, but take care of yourself. And then most importantly, the best parenting you can do right now is demonstrating your own self-care. So showing you're imperfect. If you get frustrated, come back and say, hey, maybe I should have taken a little bit of break there. I noticed that I was getting a little fidgety, or I was getting a little bit tired, and I didn't take a break, and then I blew up at you, and I'm really sorry. Our kids with Tourette's really struggle with this, and if nothing works better than demonstrating it yourself on how to take those breaks. Schedule me time, exercise, walk away. If you feel stressed, call a timeout, call a circuit breaker, just step out for a second, and that's perfect. Being imperfect is perfect. Get enough sleep, schedule that sleep. Only schedule yourself the stuff that you can do, and get creative. Good news is Pinterest and Google and YouTube have a ton of wonderful ways to keep your kids entertained and take stress off of you. You just have to make the time for it like you are now. So point is, keep on being awesome, keep on doing the good work, hang in there. This hopefully will be done soon, but the more you can incorporate naturally into your day, the better it is. So I won't go through these, but I want to give you some resources for some free exercises at this time. This is certainly not everything. There are a ton more apps out there that you can use, but Planet Fitness Teen has videos, I believe, daily that your teens can do for free. The Peloton app, you do not have to have the bike or any of their equipment, but they have 90-day free trial period where they're doing a whole bunch of different exercise. There's a lot of free apps like Super Stretch Yoga, Blogilates is a nice little blog that has great exercises, and the Nike app is free right now. Or you could do something really quick and easy, such as this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 workout. And then I could bombard you with all this, but there are a ton of calming apps and websites out there, such as calm.com, Mindshift. A lot of them are offering them for free, but as Shannon mentioned, we just need circuit breakers or some kind of reset. When you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling those nervous signs, stop and do something about it. And some of these things are wonderful. You'll see in that lower right-hand corner of your screen is the Heat Pad app, and I have a lot of kids who like it. It's free, and it just uses your hand or your pattern or your nose, whatever you put on there, and it changes colors based on your heat sensitivity. And my kids can get mesmerized by that for a long time, and it works when they're stressed. There's tons of mindfulness, the stop, breathe, and think, or stop, breathe, and do, as Shannon mentioned to you. There's a ton of 5-minute relaxation apps and endless supply. Anxiety Canada formerly known as Anxiety BC, has a nice web page where your child can click on different parts of a room and learn how to calm down and get resources. So lots of different options. And on the PDF you have, you'll be able to click all those links. And if not, just email us. But there's references for you. I know we took your time and went a little bit over, but we're open for any questions.
Thank you both so much. This was excellent. Tons of information. Thank you everyone for staying tuned in for so long. We're now going to begin answering questions that were submitted during the presentation. We have a few, so if you guys don't mind, we'll spend another like 10 or so minutes.
Sure.
And as a reminder, if you guys still have questions, feel free to submit them through the questions pane in the control panel. If we are unable to get to everybody's questions here at the TAA, we do have a full-time information and referral staff who can answer your questions as well if you email support@tourette.org or give us a call 1-888-4-TOURETTE, and we would be happy to connect with you. So Heather and Shannon, I have a few questions for you. The first one, my 13-year-old son has had Seebut therapy from an OT and was in treatment with Marquette University Tic Clinic while this quarantine started. His tics have become 100 times worse. He is having complex vocal, movement, and obsessive tics. It is keeping him from sleeping and are constant. What can we do to help him discover a new competing response?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I'm really sorry to hear that. And it's not uncommon that even when someone's in Seebut, for sometimes tics to come up and down or get, in particular, some of those OCD type tics, those tic pulsions, because anxiety is so high. So one of the best things we know with anything anxiety, OCD related, is to manage the anxiety. But I would reach out to the therapist that you worked with. One of the things that I make sure I emphasize heavily in Seebut is by the time I'm done with my 8 visits is I want them to know how to come up with a new competing response on their own. So my goal is for them to be independent and learn those tips. So reviewing the 3 steps, such as it needs to be incompatible or need to hold for a minute, less noticeable, and your therapist can brainstorm. If none of those work, then sometimes you can call for a booster session and your therapist can help pick apart some of those. It's very tough, especially some of those OCD tics that are really debilitating. But I would, once Seebut is done, the policy is that you're not done with us. Seebut isn't a one-stop fix, but it's a continual kind of process. And so I really recommend reaching back out to your son's therapist and see if they can give you some strategies, knowing your son personally.
Great, thank you. I know you both are primarily work with pediatric patients. However, can you provide any resources or have any recommendations for the use of Seebut for adults?
Sure. I would actually say close to 60% of my caseload is adults. So I actually see quite a few. And so unfortunately, there's not as many resources for adults, but I can tell you I've had a ton of adults who do Seebut virtually, in person, or use the Tic Helper and just put on their pediatric hat or the kid hat for a while. So even though Tic Helper is very much pediatric based and it talks about your child or you as a child, I have had quite a few adults who have done that and found that to be helpful as well. But tele-Seebut is not limited to pediatrics at all. Right. You just have to find a therapist who is comfortable working with adults. But in the age of telehealth, that should be a little bit easier. And if you need help finding someone, let us know.
Great, thank you. Another question for you guys. Is it worth pursuing OT services right now during quarantine when things are all virtual, or would you recommend waiting until my child can go to an office to receive OT?
I think it would be really great to start right now, and I'll tell you why. Because when you're doing telehealth, a lot of our practitioners at Little Fox, and I know my old clinic in Louisiana, Pediatric Therapy North Shore, they're all doing telehealth. And it's great because sensorily, whatever your child is seeking, they can work with you to develop a home program or a sensory diet, and they're right there in your home with you. You can't use the equipment at the clinic. And so what can we use in your own home to kind of carry that over? So I absolutely think it would be beneficial to start now.
Excellent, thank you. We've had a few questions that I just want to cover. this is recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording in your follow-up email, and it will be posted on the Tourette Association's YouTube channel, where you can find tons and tons of resources that we have done. So that will answer a few questions that we've had. Another question, is Tic Helper available in the UK and Europe? Do you know?
I believe so. It's just a website. So I believe if you have the World Wide Web, you should be able to access it. If it is not, please reach out to me and I will make sure I can find another resource for you. But I believe it is.
Great. And we have another question. Is there any study or research that shows that pets help children? We're contemplating getting a dog for our son and was wondering if that could help with anxiety and tic management.
Yeah, I would just say make sure the personality matches, because if you have a kiddo who's already anxious and all of this, you don't want a really hyper dog. More of an older dog that has a sweeter, gentler soul that'll lay on their lap and give them that deep pressure. Sorry, my headphone keeps popping up. I think would be really, really helpful. Actually, a lot of people are getting dogs right now, and it's great therapy just to even pet the dog, nice and calming. So absolutely, I would just be careful of the temperament of the dog, depending on what your child's needs are.
Yeah, and if I can caveat that too, just be mindful. I would talk to your child's providers about it. In the habit reversal world, sometimes getting attention after with tic or anxiety can actually worsen some of those symptoms. So I've had some people who animals are wonderful and they're really helpful, but the second they don't have their animal, their tics and their anxiety is out of control, because they've only learned that the dog is the only mechanism to help them feel better. And so I would just make sure that it's not a general, it's good for everyone, because pets are really fabulous, just personally, and I think most of us are really engaged in that, but make sure that it's not being used as a crutch versus more as a treatment modality or something that can be used in collaboration with other things that you're doing, is kind of a general statement. Any other questions, Angela?
Yes, just looking through them. Okay, so should the online Seebut tutorial be in conjunction with a Seebut therapist?
Oh, the Tic Helper?
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you guys are asking so many questions about Seebut, and there is a whole hour kind of webinar on Seebut. So if you have more questions, please go and see that. But there's kind of different levels, and the first most important thing about Seebut is that your child needs to be motivated and not you, right? That's probably one of the most important things. It is not going to be helpful if your child, the tics aren't bothering them, but it's only bothering you. It is not a good time to start Seebut. Or just be very careful with that. I would definitely talk to your providers about it. But oftentimes you either do one or the other. So that's where researchers are talking about trying to do, whether they do Tic Helper before Seebut or in person, or do you do it afterwards and use it as boosters? But there's no evidence one way or the other. Whichever one's available, we do know that in-person Seebut is more effective than Tic Helper itself, but Tic Helper has been found to be effective. So it really depends, and the biggest caveat is how motivated is your child right now, because you certainly don't want to turn them off to Seebut if they're not motivated right now.
Right.
Great, thank you. I did want to mention, since we have so many questions on Seebut, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if there's anyone out there looking for a Seebut therapist, on our website, tourette.org, you can go to the Find a Provider tool, and that will be the best way that you can find somebody within your area that's certified in Seebut. And if you have specific questions about your area, please reach out to us and we can try and connect you with the best person possible. But just wanted to let you know that is available on our website, and it's going to be specific to your area.
And it's linked on our PowerPoint too.
Yes. And Shannon, there's someone that says hello and that they loved what you had to say. So just wanted to let you know.
Good.
I won't point your name out so we don't name drop on here, but
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see here. Just looking through to see if we missed anything. I think that might be it. Okay, so thank you again for a wonderful presentation and all the helpful information that you guys had. As a reminder, this will be posted on the Tourette YouTube channel with the recording, and the slides will be posted on our website as well. If you have time right now, if you want to grab them, they're in the handout section that you can download. So that's all the time that we have for our webinar. Once it is closed, you will receive a survey on the presentation. We would greatly appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours, as I said, with the link to view the recording of the webinar. And additionally, I will be posted on the YouTube channel for those who are unable to participate today. We do encourage you to reach out to us about this webinar for other ideas and suggestions that you may have. And again, if we didn't get to your question, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Heather or Shannon. So on behalf of the Tourette Association, thank you again for joining and taking the time this afternoon to view our presentation. Have a great one, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye. Thank you.